What is up, everyone? This is Jacob Minig, host of the Behavioral Health Integration Podcast. Today, I have an amazing, awesome special guest, Chris Brown, LICSW. Chris, I am so honored to have you on the show, man.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Yes,
This
yes.
is fun.
So, is this your first podcast or first live one?
First live one.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a fun show.
Looking forward to it.
So, I got to ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of like where you grew up, because I know you're in the West Coast right now, right?
Yeah. I grew up on the West Coast, Washington State, near Seattle.
Okay, and then are you in Oregon right now?
No, still in Washington.
Still, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think. I got to look at your profile a little bit before. So obviously you grew up and went to high school there, and as people know, you are a former Marine. Just initially, like, what really motivated you to get in the military and then the Marines?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a few reasons. 9/11 happened when I think I was a junior in high school, and I was in that stage of figuring out what am I going to do with my life once I get out of school. A lot of my peers were looking at colleges, and being a first generation college student, I didn't really have a frame of reference for what that meant, or like I honestly didn't have much interest at the time in going down that route. There was some family history of like military service, and so that pulled on me a little bit. And also, getting the feeling that like I should probably leave my hometown in order to like grow into the adult that I want to be. I didn't see a whole lot of I guess opportunity if I would have stuck around there. And so all of these different factors were kind of playing at the same time, which led me to joining the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And I served for 4 years from 2004 to 2008. And during those 4 years, I was an infantry guy, and I deployed 3 times to Iraq and Afghanistan. I was wounded on one of those deployments. And so, as you could imagine, I was pretty worn out after those 4 years, and transitioned back home and realized like I've got some mental health issues I need to deal with pretty quickly after that.
Again, I just want to say too, sorry, I didn't say this. Thank you so much for your service.
Oh,
greatly
thanks.
honored and appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
What did you exactly do in the Marines? What was your job title, I guess?
Infantryman was the job title. So, or rifleman is another term that's used. So, the stereotypical warfighting role is the job that I had. I did patrols and waited to get shot at.
Again, I don't know a lot about the military, so I apologize for my ignorance, whatever. So
no, that's okay.
I say about Marines, like they're the first ones in and out. Is that the term? Like you guys are the first ones in the action?
I think a lot of Marines would tell you that. And
that's what I've heard.
Sometimes that's true. Other times it would be, some of the higher level special operations units that actually would be at least the first in. But yeah, I mean, Marines do have a reputation for being proficient at warfighting. That's for sure.
Okay. Awesome. So obviously, like when you're done, and again, we don't need to go into detail of the trauma that you faced over there, but when you got back home and you realized, okay, I have some traumatic symptoms, or I don't know if it was PTSD, but you realized in a sense you needed help and support, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually my father who well, I don't know if he noticed it, or it was probably several family members who noticed it together, but he's the one who came and talked to me about it. And it was really cool because he used his own experience when he was in the Navy dealing with anger issues, and explained that he went and talked to somebody about it and really helped out. And I didn't really know it at the time, but he was providing peer support for me in a way that I really needed at the time. And so I feel really fortunate and grateful for that, because it helped me jump into a path and a trajectory that has led me to down some really cool
Mhm.
opportunities. Been able to help people in some really meaningful ways. But yeah, I mean, it was certainly PTSD symptoms, drinking too much, depression, anger issues, all of that.
Mhm.
And
Was it like oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I did a good like year and a half, 2 years of individual and group therapy. I did a lot of EMDR as a client
Mhm.
before I became an EMDR therapist myself. Um, so yeah, I mean, and that was all while I was going to school with the GI Bill, and I actually started pursuing a degree in computer information systems.
Mm.
And after a few months with a therapist, and then taking an elective psychology course, I realized pretty quickly, like, I think I need to change my plan here.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I can't imagine how special it was for your father to come to you. I know that was really meaningful. Do you think, like, for, like, other individuals too, let's say if there's a normal like, not normal, but, like, a layperson like me coming and maybe noticing something off about someone, that it means more if someone in the military comes to them and shows them support rather than someone with me with no military background? Because you said your father really got out to you and reached to you, and that was powerful,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly powerful. However, I think it would have been just as helpful, like, even if he had never served in the military.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the work that I've done over the years looking at suicide specifically within the veteran population, but also generally, the way that I understand how a lot of people can end up in a place where they're considering suicide is, initially there's a lot of isolation that is happening. You know, when we do not have people around us who are looking after us and caring for us and showing concern for us, that's not a very good recipe. And so, regardless of whether you served or not, if you're noticing that somebody's, demonstrating signs and symptoms of concern, the worst thing you could do is not say anything, right?
Mhm.
And the the VA, I used to work at the VA, and I would often refer family members to a resource they call Coaching into Care,
Mhm.
and it's a way for the layperson, the family member, to think about how to have some of those more difficult conversations to support their loved ones toward getting better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just thinking too, like, do you think our society can also, and it's again a lot of topic, but like, can do a better job of welcoming veterans home? Do you think it's also a community society thing that we could be doing better for the veterans coming back?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I worked with a lot of Vietnam veterans when I
Oh
was
yeah.
at the
Ooh, yep.
VA, and their experience returning home was pretty appalling,
Yes.
frankly. You know, being called baby killers
Hmm.
and having things thrown at them at the airports, like really just heinous things. And while like most of the post 9/11 generation hasn't experienced that, I think what's often experienced is apathy, which in some ways is like, I wouldn't say better or worse, but problematic on its own.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I did when I was just leaving undergrad was start a nonprofit where veterans and civilians could come together, work together on a small farm, and we
Yep.
developed a peer support training out of that. That we would, historically, this is the training has been going on for 8 to 10 years now, and we've had about a 50% like civilian to veteran ratio for most of our trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always so cool for both sides to see like whatever stigma they thought was there, like all of that just kind of goes away when you realize we're all humans trying to go through this life on this journey as best we can,
Mm-hmm.
and realize that like regardless of whether you went to combat or grew up in a certain neighborhood or had a certain family member that caused issues, like we all have our shit that we deal with.
Right.
And normalizing that universal human experience of struggle and pain, and realizing that you're not alone in that. Again, regardless of military service or status, it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. I still have this dream of doing like a treatment center related thing where like veterans can like come and again, I don't know how long the treatment center would be or whatever, but it would be up north, like in the woods, combining like meditation, mindfulness, wilderness therapy. And I just feel like that's a lot that they could resonate with. And
Yeah, that'd be cool.
it's just a dream of mine. I mean, I don't know how I'm ever going to do it, but I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of outdoor recreation type kind of small nonprofits that exist around the country doing work like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's less that are pairing more like thought out therapies with licensed professionals. I know there are a few, but less than the more general, like let's get outdoors and spend some time together. But
Mm-hmm.
even those are meaningful and helpful for folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So going back to you, you're in college now, right? You were thinking about computer science, right? Or computer.
Computer information systems, a
Okay.
lot like networking and things like that.
And that's your.
Understanding how computers talk to each other.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
I
Wait.
took like a year of classes in that before I switched
Yep.
to focusing on mental health.
So was that your undergrad then?
Well, so that would have been working in my toward like an associate's level
Okay.
degree, but I switched just in time to where
Nice.
all of those courses counted now toward what would have been an elective, and all the other classes I took toward undergrad counted toward my ultimate degree, which was a human services degree with a
Mhm.
psychology minor.
Okay.
And for folks who don't know, human services is very similar to social work.
Absolutely. So could you tell me when you made that switch or that flip or whatnot, did you know right away, hey, I'm gonna be a therapist? Like that's what I want to do and that's it? Was it kind of like that? Or
Kind of. I remember I remember looking at the business card
okay.
of I looked through the business cards of all the therapists that were working at the VA clinic that I was
Hmm.
going to, and seeing these letters behind their name and thinking like, oh, what does that mean? I don't recognize these letters.
Hmm.
And then doing some research and realizing like, oh, this is like master's degree. How many years would that take?
One,
Oh,
two, three.
that might work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so kind of like connected the dots and realized like, oh, that's a track that actually feels attainable if I
Hmm.
play my cards right. And so yeah, I mean, my dream job goal was to like work at a clinic like that because I wanted to be able to pay it forward the way that I was helped. I wanted to be able to help other people. And that was about as far as my vision went up until like 2 years ago. Then
Gotcha.
it all kind of opened up again.
That's so cool. So obviously, there's a social work program in your area. Then you went to the social work program, graduated.
Yeah, so I got into the master's in social work program at the University of Washington and was able to do their extended degree program. It took me 3 years instead of the typical two, but it allowed me to continue working full time on the nonprofit that I had developed. And
Very cool.
so I was able to do both until I graduated. And then when I graduated, I had to, make the decision to leave the nonprofit in order to pursue licensure hours. And at the time in my state, with my discipline, that was a 3-year, 4,000 hour minimum,
Same with
which was
us.
like really daunting.
If you look at my past episodes, you'll hear me gripe about that a lot.
Yeah, well, I actually discovered, because I'm supervising now, and our state changed that requirement not too long
Really?
ago. It's now 3,000 hours,
How did you
and
guys do it?
I think 2 years. I don't know how they did it, but it's now in state law.
God,
So
we gotta do
I'm
that.
kind of jealous of the folks who are
Yeah.
dealing with that
Yeah.
now. They get to do it in a year shorter than I did.
Okay. So people, I've been really coming to terms with this. My anger is not towards to all my audience members out there. It's not supervision. Supervision in general is great. I still do it from time to time, consultation. What I'm saying, they make you do a lot to get licensed. And for me, I think of like license is a good chance to make some money in this, like a career, make enough money to live off of. That's how I kind of look at it, people. So if you ever misunderstood what I was trying to say, it's good, but they make us do too much to get licensed. And then
It's a
once you get
lot.
licensed, you can make a good living.
Yeah.
Not, a chance to have a good living.
I mean, if you add the years of schooling and then work toward licensure, it's a decade. I mean, it
I
was a decade for me. It was 10 years.
mm, I got 6 figures in student loans. So it's just that aspect of it too.
Mhm. I was lucky with the GI Bill. I mean, I paid for it in other ways. You
Right.
know, my my mind and my body and all the crap I endured in the military. But I'm very fortunate to not have to deal with student loans.
But yeah, but you're again an inspiration to a lot of people, going through this where they can look at your story and just have something to believe in. So like I think that's just very powerful in itself. And
Thanks. I would hope that some people could hear what I've done and be inspired by that. And in particular about like the first generation college student thing. I was reflecting on that recently, how strange that is to be the only person in my family with a graduate degree.
mhm.
And realizing, I said earlier, like, I didn't really want to go to college, but I also know now that, like, part of that is probably because I wasn't really shown how to go to college.
Right.
So I kind of like just told myself I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Uh, but I can't blame my folks for that because they didn't know how either. Um, but I'm very blessed to have been married to someone whose family had that kind of experience. And I got married while I was still in the military, and when I got out, she was finishing up undergrad
Mhm.
and was able to help kind of walk me through the steps of getting started in school. And the first 2 years, it's felt like just so foreign and hard to really get plugged into and feel comfortable with. But once I kind of got more comfortable, everything started to feel like it made sense finally.
Where did you and your wife meet?
We actually knew each other growing up in high
Oh,
school.
nice.
We worked at the same retirement center in high school.
Super cool.
Yeah, I mean, we were friends back then, and then started dating while I was in the military.
Nice. So you knew her family for a while now. In a sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, at this point, her and I are hanging with the old folks at the weddings when they say, like, well, if you've been married for this long, step off the dance floor.
Oh,
We're still there for a
nice.
little while longer.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm thinking, okay, so you graduate, right? And obviously you partake in EMDR therapy, and through your
Yeah.
experience with your therapist, that really motivated you to eventually, again, now that I'm trained, and now I have a better understanding of the process. So people, when you first do EMDR, you're not certified, even though it's kind of weird. You think you're trained like me, but then like Chris, you're certified, which does not happen right away, right, Chris?
Correct. Yeah. So the language is right. Like you get the basic training, they call it levels 1 and 2. You're now an EMDR trained therapist. And in order to become a certified EMDR therapist, you have to have done EMDR with a minimum amount of clients. You have to have done consultation of EMDR with an approved consultant, and you have to have checked the boxes for additional continuing education units focused on EMDR. So once you've got all that completed, and the consultation is a minimum of 20 hours with a consultant, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many client hours you have to have, but it's enough to make sure that like you've been doing EMDR a while, and EMDRIA, the agency that does these certifications, they're more comfortable saying that you're certified by them at that point.
And some people might think, oh, that's too much, where this or that. It's like, no, because like I don't know if you ever heard of this. They some people, not in a negative way, but call EMDR fad. Like it's the fad for like the past 5 years because it's the new awesome trauma intervention, even though it's been around since the 80s, I think, right?
89, I think, is when Francine Shapiro first thought of it.
And just telling
Early
everyone out
90s.
there, which scares the hell out of me, that there's therapists doing that who are not even EMDR trained. I guess the point being is that you really need to know what you're doing, or else you could really hurt someone mentally and emotionally. Would you agree, Chris, or anything to add to that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very specific approach. It's a very powerful approach, and in the wrong hands can activate a lot of difficult experiencing for the client, that if you're not equipped to know how to manage or navigate or support somebody through, could yes cause quite a bit of harm.
Well, just about me, Chris, I got messed up during training off of that. I don't know if you knew anybody,
Oh,
but
really?
like when EMDR was done to me, after the first weekend, because there was like 2 weekend trainings, my head was not right for like 4 days. So that's why I'm saying, people, like, I'm a licensed
Yeah.
therapist, and it was done on me, and I was not in a good place. A lot of anger, a lot of emotions coming up. So what I'm saying is, you need to be really careful. Not saying I'm better than anyone, but you look at me like I'm a licensed therapist with coping skills, and that still messed me up.
Yeah. Well, in that 4 days you mentioned,
Oof.
a good EMDR therapist would know, and often I will tell clients, especially the first few sessions they're doing with me, at the end of the session, I'll remind them, like, hey, you may have what we call continued processing. And if that happens, what it looks like is thoughts, feelings, emotions that are related to what we looked at today. It might persist for the next couple of days, but usually it peters out over, at the most 72 to 96 hours, like 3 to 4 days. And it's normal. That can be part of this process. So if it happens, just know you're not going crazy. It's okay. Report back to me what you notice, and we'll continue with it when we meet next.
People, listen to Chris. Listen to Chris right now. Shout out to my train. That was not told to me. I love the training I did. Nothing against. That warning was not told to me, and it caught me off guard. So please listen to Chris. This is so true.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I don't know what training you did. You probably shouldn't say it on air, but what I just described is not necessarily conducive to a follow. Like, you can't really do that kind of follow up in a training context. But it would have been nice to have known that.
It catches you off guard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I say it to every client, because if you don't, they don't know, you may not know how to make sense of what you're experiencing after an EMDR session. And it could be really easy to talk yourself out of continuing with the therapy. But that saying, you've got to feel it in order to heal it. It definitely rings true with EMDR. And if you can normalize it as like, this is part of this process. I'm never going to promise this is going to be an easy thing for you to do, but it is going to make your life easier once you get through it. And so, like, let's try to do this in as safe a container as we can.
You might think this is kind of interesting, but I don't know if my bad experience like helped me or hindered me. But when I started doing EMDR to my clients, I think I might have been overly protective of them. Because
Mhm.
right after I did, I'm like, if you feel any strong emotions, use your coping tools, use A, B, C. But I'm starting to think in my head, like, it's like, dude, Jake, stop. You're gonna like scare them now about how protective you're being. You might be freaking them out now. So just pull back a little bit. I
It
don't know
it
if you
can
get
take a
away.
while to find the language, the
Yep.
sentiment that fits for your style, and allows the client to continue with the process. That takes time and kind of experimentation.
We have our
So don't
first
be
con
don't beat
oh,
yourself up about
I know, I know, but I was like, it's like, Jake, just relax. You could be scaring them.
it.
We have our first comment here. It is, if you want to read that, Daniela. Can you see that, Chris?
Yeah.
Training that I was practicing it, me became too nervous and didn't
Oh
Oof,
yeah, that could be tough.
not a good experience. Oof. Let me read that here. Oh no. So she didn't want to finish it.
So
See,
the
mine was
trainee.
telehealth. Yeah.
Oh, you did your training over telehealth?
I did. I'm assuming she did hers in person, I think.
Interesting. Probably. Most of them I think still are in person. But so the
We
trainee was too nervous, didn't want to finish. Yeah, that just makes me wonder about, like the trainee therapists, like if there was transference going on and they couldn't hold that therapeutic space.
mhm.
I mean, if that is the case, then it certainly is a nod to the importance of us as therapists doing our own healing work before we can, hold this kind of more vulnerable, deep space for
Mhm.
the clients that we work with. I don't know if that was the case or not with Daniela's example, but I certainly can feel the pain of that not being a good experience.
Well, I'll tell you what happened in my experience. I don't know if it had anything to do with me, but as any EMDR therapist, like SUDS is like the distress scale.
Yeah.
And through the treatment planning, obviously there's like the 3 goals or 3 avenues you will go down. I know the lead therapist said, "Do not pick any side above a 6 or a 7 when you do your processing for the first time."
Oh, for the
Okay.
trading.
So I had a thought, but I'm thinking, "Wait, this side is bigger than a 6." So my coach trainer and I were talking in the group, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess she said no." He's like, "Oh, no, you're fine. Just do yours. It's fine. I think that'll be really good for you." I mean, I don't know if that was the reason I had such a negative effect. 'Cause
Could
it
be.
was a good one. It was a good one that feels like it
Yeah.
would have related to me a lot. Uh, but maybe I should have picked a more minimal one. Maybe I wouldn't have had such a strong reaction to that. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you shared that, because the, this is relevant to the approach I usually take with clients. The conventional EMDR wisdom says if we can target the first of the worst, it's going to have the biggest bang for the buck. Like the
Mhm.
most powerful outcomes are likely to happen in that space. But with your experience being a good testament, sometimes when we just jump to the first of the worst, that can be pretty destabilizing and problematic for the client. And so I will often, you know, develop a comprehensive list and look for something that's maybe not as connected to the bigger
Mhm.
things, or maybe more of like in the 5 or 6 range. It's middle of the road. It's still relevant. It's still on your list,
Mhm.
but it's not going to be the worst, like the worst thing you've ever experienced. And that can be a way to help people ease into the process, develop more comfort and confidence in, we're asking people to do some weird things with this EMDR, follow the
Yep.
dot, like it's kind of a weird protocol if you look back and think about it. So easing into it with a little less of a distressing target initially can really help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing too, like I personally feel EMDR is amazing. It's great, but it's just not used in always the right way. Where I mean, I'll talk to a lot of people for like consultations, and they always tell me, "Oh, I see your EMDR, but I've done EMDR and I had a horrible experience, horrible experience." And I just remember this one time doing this consultation with this woman. You just feel the trauma on her and the body language, and just the brief story she was telling me about the trauma, and she's talking about like frozen memories, this or that. From what I was taught in my training, Chris, I don't know if you can probably definitely add to this. There's like obviously people 8 stages of EMDR, right? And you could spend a lot of time in therapy just in 1 and 2 because they're not emotionally ready for the traumatic feelings that you're gonna be going through.
Mhm.
So, just hearing this woman's story, it's like, I feel like this therapist should never have done the bilateral stimulation. I don't think you're, like, ready just from the language you're talking to me about and what you're experiencing right now.
Mhm.
I would and all the trauma she was just telling me within the first 5 minutes, it's just I don't know. I would have waited a while for you for the first couple stages before I would even consider doing the bilateral stimulation. What do you think, Chris, of that?
Yeah, I definitely I don't typically rush into it. I I spend several sessions usually teaching tools, teaching techniques, self-management, self-awareness, skills and strategies. Ask them to practice between sessions, report back what they're noticing, and once I'm starting to get a sense that I'm hearing examples of you using this skill outside of our sessions, I'll ask them, can you rate how confident are you now in your ability to recognize when you're emotionally triggered and to use one of these tools to, help manage that. And usually if they're getting close to like the 7 or above range in confidence, then I'll say, it seems like you might be ready to start diving into the deeper stuff that might activate difficult emotions, but now we have evidence that you know how to manage that. So, like, long story short, like, yes, I definitely would agree. Taking your time in introducing these sort of regulation skills can be really important, and that's also true for the like psychedelic integration therapy preparation work. One of the when you look at the list of contraindications for psychedelic therapies generally, one of the things that often ends up on the list is untreated PTSD or dissociative disorders. And the operative term there is untreated. And
Mhm.
it really is kind of alluding to this. Like if you don't have the skills and the awareness and the strategies and tools in place to manage hard emotions when they happen, signing up for an experience that might, alter your state of consciousness to the degree that could be very like triggering and destabilizing, you're not really setting up for success. And so, for therapists that might be working with clients who are planning to, go pursue a round of ketamine treatments,
Mhm.
or, in Washington, we're so close to Oregon. Like if somebody's planning on going down to Oregon for a psilocybin service center experience, like if there are those symptoms that are unregulated, a really ethical harm reduction approach that we can take is teaching these skills and techniques before they might go and do that. So there is quite a bit of overlap between the way that EMDR therapists think about things and the way that psychedelic integration therapists would think about things.
That's so cool that you said that because when I had individuals on here in the past, like we would talk about like psychedelics, like the different types, which can be all good, but I know one of the guests was just telling me, but regardless, they need basic coping skills and emotional management, mindfulness skills to
Mhm.
even get some benefit from, again, like things like psilocybin or other psychedelics to, again, maintain their energy levels in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Same
forgot to.
idea. I
Oh,
mean,
sorry.
in EMDR terms, we're talking about supporting, helping someone stay in that window of tolerance
Yes,
where,
yes.
we can tolerate a certain degree of distress in order to sit in that space, process, resolve, and ultimately, hopefully, heal from it. But we have to create some window in order to get there. And a lot of times, these tools and techniques is exactly what people need to make that happen.
So I always love talking about this because, again, window of tolerance, you get into like the freeze stage, fight or flight. And even in like one-on-one therapy, when individuals are in that stage, again, there's some different ways you can maybe tell just from their language, their body language, how they're kind of reacting. If they're in those stages, therapy in that sense does no good, right? Because again, when they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, they can't really like comprehend what you're saying in the moment, right? As well.
Yeah, I mean that would be. I would imagine there's probably some neuroscience studies that have
Mhm.
looked at this, but I would imagine it would be difficult for the brain to be able to like internalize or integrate new ways of thinking or perceiving when it's
Mhm.
in a fight or flight mode. I
Right.
mean, from everything I've seen and understand about fight or flight state, there's not a whole lot of like capacity for that kind of like considering and processing and reconciling for creating those adaptive changes. There's just not much capacity there when someone's in
Mhm.
that state. So I would agree with that. I can't cite studies to support it,
Mhm.
but anecdotally, I would certainly agree with that.
Absolutely. I forgot to ask you, so for all of you that didn't know, Chris is also MAP certified?
Yeah, so MAPS certification is like EMDR, right? So there's MAPS trained. So I've taken the training in MDMA assisted therapy, and the last time I checked, what they told us in the training is once you have participated in one of these FDA approved trials with a client, then you can submit an application for the certificate. So
Mm,
I don't have the certificate because I haven't participated in any of those trials, but I have gone through the 100-hour training that they provide.
okay. Yeah, just from what I hear from everybody, like, MAPS is definitely, like, the gold standard when it comes to psychedelic-assisted certifications and knowledge. Because you get it, I don't know if you notice, you get a lot of these other organizations that are just, like, popping up like crazy now saying, "Oh, we can get you certified in this and that and this and that." And I'm as a therapist, I'm skeptical because it's just like, well, it's not legal yet. I know in Minnesota, it's just
Yeah.
not legal, so if I'm gonna get any certification, it will be through MAPS. It would be hard for
Mhm.
me to just to trust any other one. Not saying, like, the other ones are really bad or not. It's just I don't know, I'm just very cautious when I take that approach.
I think it's good to be cautious. There are a few others that have pretty extensive, robust trainings at this point that seem to be comparable to what MAPS
Mhm.
offers. But and MAPS has actually like is partnered with some of them to offer
Okay.
their training through their platforms. Uh, but I understand the sentiment because at least as far as MAPS is concerned, we're talking about a protocol that has been like thoroughly utilized in FDA approved research trials for the last like decade.
Mhm.
And so there is this like sense of this feels more legitimate. This feels more approved in terms of like the powers that be. Um, but in terms of the work that I do with clients, I guess it matters less because
Mhm.
I'm not in like when we talk about psychedelic assisted therapy, we're talking about the three-phase model that psychedelic assisted therapy represents. Phase one being the preparation work that happens before a drug is administered. And that's usually like at least 1 to 3 sessions. You know, the MAPS protocol would say 3 sessions before MDMA is administered. Phase 2 is the experiential phase with the molecule, the drug, the substance, the psychoactive, you know, element. And, you know, depending on what drug that you're talking about, like it could be from an hour to 8 hours or more of sitting with a client. And then phase 3 is the integration work, which is like preparation. It's therapy without the substance. And so, like with the MAPS protocol, for example, there's 3 preparation sessions. There's the dosing session. There's 3 integration sessions, dosing, 3 integration, dosing, 3 integration. So there's a lot. There's, what would that equate to? Like, I think 3 to 5 times more. I didn't major in math. There's many more therapy sessions in the MAPS protocol than there are sessions with MDMA. And when I learned that at the training, I was like, you know, this feels like something that really isn't well known or talked about. Like the role of therapy in all this really matters. And you know, this was 4+ years ago when I had that aha moment, and it wasn't as being as talked about it as it is these days. But I started to think about like, well, I've got clients that I know, they've told me after the fact, and initially I was like really skeptical and cautious and concerned, but like people who are suffering are going and doing this regardless. And so from a harm reduction perspective, it's like, well, similar to suicide prevention or intervention skills, like I need to be able to have these discussions and support people who, you know, and you know, the term harm reduction, it comes from the substance abuse field. It's like, well, we're going to talk about this in order to help you. You know, I'm not going to have a rule that we can't discuss whatever drug you're using, or you know, how much alcohol, or like I'm not going to require sobriety. That's different in this context because typically we're not talking about addiction, but the term harm reduction comes from that. And you know, it really does suggest that like I'm going to be able to talk about these things with you, you know, talk about risks, talk about ethics and legality. You know, in Washington State, you know, the typical conversation is around ketamine clinics that are, you know, accessible and around by licensed providers, or like I said earlier, down in Oregon, psilocybin service centers that are licensed service centers with licensed facilitators. And so this is just becoming more of a requirement at this point to be able to like feel competent in my field, in my profession still, to be able to know how to have these discussions and integrate what would look like the 3-phase PAT model. Phases 1 and 2 is really what I integrate into the approach that I take with clients with EMDR. So like I'm not involved in the dosing sessions. I'm not involved in phase 2 at all. But if clients are planning to pursue something independently, they know that like we can discuss that, and we can find a way to integrate whatever they're planning into making sure that it helps them get closer to their treatment goals.
We have actually another question from Daniela again. I'll put that up.
What qualifications do you need to get hired or approved to provide psychedelic treatment in the FDA trial? So I can't speak authoritatively on that question, but from what I think I know is it depends on the trial itself and the investigative body that's leading it. So like with the MAPS MDMA assisted therapy trial, you would need to have taken the MAPS MDMA assisted therapy training. Another well-known one is the Compass Pathways psilocybin trial, and I believe they have their own training as well that like has its own protocol for that trial. I assume that's probably the case for any FDA trial that's going on that is incorporating the drug and the therapy. But that would, in order to know for sure, you'd have to reach out to the research investigators.
Well said. Um, and this I think would be a good time to get to this part of the interview where it's just like you help therapists like myself who do want to do the service and integrate. Can you, or would you like to explain a little bit about that process? Like, let's say if I come into your office and be like, "Hey, Chris, can you really help me out?" What process would that be, or what would it look like in a way?
Yeah, so you're in my office. I work remotely, so it's all
Nice.
remote meetings. Um, but there's a couple options. I mean, I have a free newsletter, and if folks sign up, they get, I think, 8 to 10 emails over the course of a few weeks that talk about different things to consider, different topics, in this integration therapy space. And if folks want to like start getting a little closer to incorporate it into the work that they do with clients, in terms of ethics and, considering what most licensing boards would want to see or consider is, have you consulted with other professionals if you're starting to kind of get on the edge of your scope of competency that people want to see, and you should. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for consultation, having gone through all the EMDR consultation that I've done and continue to lead EMDR consultation groups. Like, I see the merits of ongoing consultation. And so I think licensing boards are right to expect that. But it's especially important if you're considering doing something outside of your normal scope of competency. And so I have a consultation group that therapists could subscribe to, and it basically grants access to weekly and biweekly sessions. At this point, we've got, I think, a dozen or so recorded subject matter expert presentations. We have a subject matter expert come in once a month to, help us understand a specific area related to this work. Sometimes attorneys, sometimes other clinicians. We had a marketing person. So that's what the consultation group looks like. And I also have an ethics due diligence paper on my website that I did before I started any of this. I did it for myself, but I'm sharing it with others. It's something that they might use to think about, like, how can I find that sweet spot between the work I want to do with clients and what I need to make sure I'm doing to maintain my licensure and not risk losing my license. And then, kind of, it's like an annotated review of state law and national standards for me, it was clinical social work, and kind of annotating and articulating with anything that I found that was relevant, how the approach that I take is not like in conflict with any of that. And I did it for me to kind of help me, understand what are my limitations, where do I need to focus, but also, like, if there were an occasion where for some reason, my state board thought I was doing something that I wasn't, I would already have a document that I could send them and say, well, this is what I do. And so, like, whatever you assumed or thought is wrong. So for me, that really helped. And that's something that I have free on my website that therapists can use. And I encourage folks to, like, repurpose it for your own state or discipline, just as just if nothing else, like a thought exercise to think about how to make sure that you're doing this in the most ethical way possible.
There's this one situation I wanted to bring up before, and I know we're kind of coming to the end, but
Yeah.
I know, like, a lot of the individuals out there are really struggling right now with trauma, depression, and getting back to that lady I was telling you about with the, like, consultation, all the trauma.
Mhm.
I knew it would not have helped her because she wanted psilocybin. That's like, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. I could maybe educate you on some things, but like, she's like, I've been through this therapy, that therapy. I've been through EMDR. Nothing works. Nothing works. I need help. And I felt so bad with her, and I empathize. And I don't know if you see a lot of that in your practice, but I see a lot of it here where it's just like they just want help, and they hear about all the stories about psychedelics helping people, so they just want to get on it. And again, I can empathize, but again, I know that could also be dangerous. Did you have any thoughts on that, or do you see a lot of those clients who just want it really badly?
Um, the amount of clients who have presented with that, with the presentation that you're describing, is not very high for
Hmm.
me. However, I have had several clients who had that same kind of idea, like, this is my best option.
Yep.
This is what I'm committed. I have to do this. And a little bit of psychoeducation and exploration, and helping them understand that while that is an option, may not be your best option right now, and this is why.
Hmm.
And if you want, we can focus on helping you through some things that might get you to a place where that would be more effective for you. It might be more supportive for you. But just helping them understand that from what you see, if they were to pursue that without doing anything beforehand, it might not be the cure fix all that they're thinking it's going to be. Because there are many stories of people pursuing psychedelic experiences and having very difficult, like,
Hmm.
traumatic experiences. And I'm on the international work group for psychedelic assisted EMDR, and my colleagues in the UK, they're focusing on using EMDR for that, for helping
Mm.
people process a traumatic psychedelic experience.
Mm.
And even to some cases that they've shared with me, like, to the degree of like psychosis type
Oh.
symptoms, doing some EMDR to process the conditions under a psychedelic experience that led to that can help, like, get those symptoms resolved. So there's some really, like, neat ways in which EMDR is supporting the overall, like, psychedelic therapy world. And in my opinion, the way that I think of it is integration is multifaceted, because we can use EMDR to like I just said, like, process or resolve a difficult psychedelic experience. We can also use it to support and strengthen a good outcome. Like,
Mm.
if somebody had really profound insights or developed a deeper level of like strength and internal resources, we can use EMDR to strengthen that. You probably
Mm.
heard about resource development installation or feature templates. We can use tools like that to support integration. And sometimes people realize in a psychedelic journey that they've got some unresolved stuff that they need to work on, and EMDR is perfect for that.
Mhm.
So, like, that's how I think about EMDR for the integration side. And then on the preparation end, beforehand, with clients who are, like, really, like, just keyed up
Yes.
with PTSD, hypervigilant, just really quick to irritability or reactivity, doing some EMDR, just basic protocol stuff on intentional targets that might help reduce some of that intensity, that can really support them before going into a psychedelic journey as well. Uh,
Mhm.
and that goes back into, like, the harm reduction, assessing risk, talking about, what can I do to help you if you're going to go do this anyway. I can't stop you, but like, let's try to make this as meaningful as we can, because you do have treatment goals that I'm here to
Mhm.
support.
Yeah. And God, like, when I say this, like, I don't want it to come off as I'm bashing other EMDR therapists, but from your point, from the traumatic story she was telling me and just, her impulsiveness, her body language and her impulsiveness is just like, I'm not surprised you don't remember a lot of stuff. I'm not surprised that you can understand frozen memories or trauma memories, or because it seems like from what you're telling me, you were out of your window of tolerance
Mhm.
while they were doing the bilateral. So it would not surprise me that you weren't getting much out of it, because I feel like you might have been moved along too fast. Again, I don't know that. I'm not trying to bash another therapist, but that's just what I was getting from her.
Yeah. Yeah, for a client like that, I might consider recommending, pursuing DBT therapy to
Good.
really spend a lot of time on those skills, the self-reflection, self-awareness. There's a lot of great DBT skills that people can learn that can support being prepared for something like EMDR.
Mm,
And I'm not a DBT person, so it would be like a referral, and then if you want to pursue EMDR later, once you've done that, like re-engage and let's talk about that. I did a lot of that when I was at the VA, and I've done that occasionally in private practice too. And it always works out pretty well when the client goes and does that and comes back.
Excellent example of coordination of care too. That's, yeah, a
Yeah.
great example. Um, well,
It's a
again,
journey.
Chris.
Mental health stuff, like
Oh
there's
yeah.
no quick fix.
No.
It's important to normalize that. Like, this stuff takes time, and that's okay.
Amen. So true. Well, God, there's so much more I want to get into, but I know we're ending. I definitely want to have you on the show again sometime in the
Sure.
future. But
Yeah.
Chris, as we're ending, I like to ask people like what are your future goals moving forward in this field, like in the next 5 to 10 years? Is there anything that kind of comes to your mind that you maybe want to accomplish before we?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for asking.
Yeah,
I've been putting a lot of thought into this over the last 6 months or so.
perfect.
Um, so I'm currently trying to figure out how to marry these different ideas and observations I've been making, which are there are a lot of really skilled EMDR therapists out there who are interested in or want to know more about or should know more about how to use EMDR to support special applications like psychedelic integration.
Mm,
Something else I've spent some time with is EMDR for performance enhancement, pain management, feeling state addictions. And all of these niche areas happen to be areas of interest or usefulness for several communities, but the one that I'm starting to focus more on is the first responder community. And one of the reasons I'm really becoming more passionate in serving the first responder community is I've had, over the years, several clients who were first responders, a lot of them previously at the VA who were also veterans, but, more recently, even non-military veterans who are first responders. And I've seen a lot of overlap in, the culture, the symptoms, the way that it manifests in terms of work and relationships. And the first responder community it almost feels like it's where the veteran community was when
mhm,
I first got out. Like there's not as much support available. The VA is the largest healthcare
mhm,
institution in the world, right? And
mhm,
there's a lot of resources that veterans have through the VA and the tens of thousands of veteran-focused nonprofits that exist. The first responder community does not have all that. But in my region, at least, a few agencies are really starting to focus on how can they, offer some of these more like hard to access but more advanced and specific treatment options for their first responders.
mhm.
And I've been having conversations with them about ways that I can support them in those goals. And so it's starting to look like a really great opportunity to sort of honor the role that therapists play, the EMDR therapists play in supporting people with this very focused special skill set and honor the role that first responders play in our society and kind of connecting the two to create really meaningful therapeutic outcomes. So that's like 10 years from now, I hope that I have an agency built where that is happening ideally all across the country. We're going to be starting here in Washington, but I've already communicated with therapists and agencies in other states that would love to see that too.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Definitely. Anything I could do to support you, I'm gonna do, man.
Cool. I appreciate it.
No, that's a beautiful thing. And before we end things, if any of my audience members want to get a hold of you, message you, communicate with you, what's the best way? Or do you have a website, email they could use?
Yeah, LinkedIn is easiest, or they can go on my website and find me that way as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the website is peakpsychotherapy.co. So CO without the M. Peakpsychotherapy.co.
And for all my audience members, I will get all the information on my show notes and a link, so it'll be one click away when you want to contact Chris. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
Again, man.
David.
Oh, I had so much fun, and I'm definitely gonna have you on again sometime soon.
Sure.
And just thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.
Amen.
All right.